Hi everyone, this video is part 3 of a series on clinical psychology, which is the 8th unit in AP Psychology. This particular video will cover mood-related disorders that are classified in the DSM. So first, mood is a natural experience that we have as human beings. It's just a state of mind or a feeling, an emotional state. But a mood disorder would be a disorder that would be characterized by emotional extremes. So this would mean highs and lows outside of maybe the normal experience. So to start with, just the prevalence of mood disorders, there are many mood disorders in the DSM. And they're classified by different categories, and so I'll talk about that throughout the video. One of the categories that we'll focus on today is major depressive disorders, and the second is bipolar related disorders. And so I'll explain the prevalence of those here in this slide. Major depressive disorders, or just major depression, is something that is a more commonly seen in the US. It's more prevalent. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, there was data collected on major depression in 2017 of adults aged 18 and older. And in 2017, just in that year, it was estimated that 17.3 million adults in the United States had at least one major depressive episode. So this represented about 7% of the US population in that year. Now, bipolar related disorders are less common, and from the same source, from the National Institute of Mental Health, they took and collected data and estimated that over a lifetime. So it's estimated that 4% of US adults will experience bipolar disorder at some time in their lives. So these are two disorders that I will cover in this video. I'll cover a few others that are related to mood, but those are the two major disorders. First, I think it's really important, though, that I remind you where this comes from. So the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders is a book that classifies mental illnesses by their symptoms. So each mental illness will have a list of symptoms and a certain criteria that must be met in order to be diagnosed with those symptoms, with that disorder. The DSM does not provide any kind of treatment methods. That is up to the medical provider, the medical care person that you are seeing, whether that's a therapist or a psychiatrist or a doctor. They will decide the treatment method. There are some factors that are related to mood disorders. So the first are biological factors. I think often we forget that mental illnesses are like other illnesses we have in their body. Often they are caused by physical roots. And so just like other illnesses that we have, mental illnesses often have physical explanations as well. And so in mood-related disorders, there are physical causes in some cases, and one is serotonin. Serotonin is believed to be the neurotransmitter that's responsible for mood regulation, and it also helps promote recovery of depression. So there are antidepressants like Prozac and Zoloft that when those are taken, they inhibit the reuptake of serotonin. And so what it does is it keeps serotonin in the synapse. So it keeps serotonin moving through and the message of mood regulation going. And so serotonin is a mood regulation neurotransmitter. Norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter that increases arousal and an arousal state. And when it's scarce, we see during depression, we see a scarcity of norepinephrine, and in abundance, we've also seen manic states, which is like a high and elevated state. And so those are two neurotransmitters related to mood disorders. Next are social and cognitive factors. This term, rumination, if someone were to ruminate, that person is overanalyzing, they are overthinking, they are fixating. It's a cognitive process where you are continually and relentlessly self-focusing on things that you could do better or should, and you're just overthinking. This is something that can be caused by social factors as well, and typically women are at higher risk of rumination, which can put them at a higher risk of depression. Now, somebody who ruminates does not mean that they will experience major depression, but rumination is a cognitive influence. And so if someone is ruminating, it can influence those feelings, those low feelings. The first illness that I'll outline is disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. This is a diagnosis that's given to children, and this is given to children who have emotional volatility, and so they are having difficulty maintaining control of their emotions. And this is different than just a child who's frustrated. This is a child who is unable to calm down. They're experiencing lots of impulsivity and negative emotions. This would look a lot like if a parent asked a child to turn off their video games to get ready for their homework. One child might just be frustrated and annoyed, but a child who's been diagnosed with disruptive mood dysregulation disorder might throw tantrums, throw things across the room, yell, hit, scream, scratch, break things, and have trouble calming down from that situation. And so this would be something that is given to children as a diagnosis, because oftentimes children who have this volatility and emotion as young children change as they move into adolescence and adulthood, and oftentimes as they grow and develop, those symptoms change. Sometimes children who have been diagnosed with disruptive mood dysregulation disorder start to have different symptoms as they get older, and it changes into depression or anxiety. And for these reasons, typically treatment changes as they get older as well. And so that's why this is often something that is given as a diagnosis to children. Next is major depressive disorder, or what many people know as depression. This is something that the symptoms have to at least last for 2 weeks or more. They have to have the first two bolded symptoms, so a depressed mood and a loss of interest or pleasure in activities that they would have normally enjoyed. But they also have to have a few others. So according to the DSM, they have to have 5 of these symptoms for 2 or more weeks, but they must have the first 2. So some of these other symptoms that come with major depression are having a significant appetite or weight change, irregularity in sleep, whether that means too much or too little sleep. They're not able to sleep at night anymore, or they're struggling to fall asleep, or that might mean that they are now sleeping more than hours on end when they normally wouldn't have. Maybe being physically agitated or lethargic, having fatigue or energy loss. Also feelings of guilt, excessive guilt, or feeling just worthless and just very down. They might have a difficult time focusing or concentrating, and they might have trouble making decisions throughout the day. And then finally, they might have recurrent thoughts of death and suicide. It could be suicide ideation without a plan, or they possibly could have made plans or even attempted before. Those are all symptoms of major depression. So before moving on to the next illness, I just wanted to make sure I shared with you some suicide prevention things to keep in mind. So to start with, I'll let you know that I won't go through all of these. I will just leave them on the screen though. You can definitely pause it and look at these a little bit further if you'd like to, but I'll highlight a few. So risk factors would mean that these are things that could possibly make someone more at risk for thinking about or wanting to follow through with suicide. And so the more of the risk factors someone might have, the more concerning it might be. Now, risk factors are just risks. Warning signs would be things that we should be very concerned about when we maybe have a few risk factors, or we have a friend with a few risk factors and then they start exhibiting warning signs. That would be something that we would immediately want to reach out to a parent, an adult. You would want to reach out to a counselor or a teacher or someone you trust and let them know that you are concerned. And so please take a second to look at these. I also have the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at the bottom that can be called at any time, and you can talk with anyone that is on the other end there, and they will talk you through if you are feeling at any point like you are having suicide ideation or thoughts of hurting yourself. The next slide I have is something that I think is really important, especially if you have friends that you might be concerned about or family members. These are things to do. So things that if you are concerned about someone else, that what you should do. So if you are concerned, I think the number one thing to take away is please ask them, talk to them. I think sometimes people feel uncomfortable and they don't want to ask, but the number one thing to do to support someone in crisis is just to be honest and say, I'm concerned. Have you ever thought about hurting yourself? And it is okay if they, if it is okay, whatever their answer is, it is okay, but you need to ask and just ask. And it is okay. It's okay, whatever their answer is, whether it's yes or no, but you need to ask. Some of the other tips are just be calm, be patient. Whatever they tell you, just be ready to answer calmly. Don't argue with them. Don't debate about whether their thoughts are right or wrong. But listen, be concerned, show them that you are concerned. Of course, if you know that they have any means to carry through this, whether that's substances or weapons, remove them, and then contact help. Contact a parent. If you are a student, contact an adult. Contact someone who can help. Definitely, if it's a child, contact their parents. And you can always contact 911 if you are immediately concerned. I do have a text line, a crisis text line at the bottom, that if you're texting your friend or you're messaging your friend, you could also give them this messaging number that they could contact someone with. But the number one thing is, it is okay, and you should ask. Ask if they are okay. Be very specific. Have you thought about hurting yourself? Have you made plans to kill yourself? And that might be hard words to come out of your mouth, but it's important, and it lets them know that you are concerned. The next slide is an illness, another illness, persistent depressive disorder. This would be similar to major depression, but this is something that is enduring and long-lasting. This would be diagnosed if someone is experiencing depression or depressive symptoms for 2 years or more. Next is bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is characterized by having shifts in moods, often week to week, but it's having shifts from a high feeling to a low feeling. Mania is the term that is given to the intense highs that someone feels when they have bipolar disorder. Mania is marked by these very intense highs, and intense is relative. So it could be just feelings of optimism and elevated and energetic, or it could be on a spectrum of even more extreme elevated feelings, like from high self-esteem to very talkative to easily distractible to racing thoughts to being very driven to complete and achieve to being very impulsive and committing risky behaviors. And so it could be on this spectrum of just feeling very energetic to being very impulsive. Now, that person might experience that feeling of those feelings of mania for days or weeks, but then bipolar disorder would be that there is a time where it shifts into a low. Or a feeling of depression after a week or so. And so bipolar disorder is the switching from the high to the low. There are 2 types of bipolar disorder. There's type 1 and type 2, and type 1 would be more intense manic episodes that would last longer than type 2. Type 2 would have a hypomanic state, which is more mild and shorter, but still very similar of experiencing from one time the highs, for the next time the lows. Lastly, I just want to share with you that it is important that if you are concerned about a friend or a family member, that you reach out to them and let them know that you care about them. But also, if it's a student, if it's a child, definitely reach out to their parents and let their parents know. Sometimes we don't think, it's hard to see what we can do, but sometimes seeing outside of yourself and contacting an adult is the first right step. Guys, let me know if you have any questions about any of this. I hope it was helpful, and have a great day.